Welcome to the stream. I'm Josh Rushing. People across France have joined huge protests against President Emmanuel Macron's proposals to raise the minimum retirement age. Unions are pledging to keep fighting after the plan was approved by the Senate. Today, we look at the standoff between workers and the government and ask how the bill could change life in France. Joining us today from Paris is Gaëlle Martinez. She's a spokesperson for Union Syndicale Solidaire, which represents a group of French trade unions. Also in Paris is Cole Stengler. He's a journalist and an analyst who covers labor and politics in France. And Ariane Bogain is a professor of French politics in Northumbria University. She joins us from Newcastle in the UK. Also joined by you in this conversation. You can join it by sending us your comments, your questions for our panel through our live YouTube chat, which you can see right there. All right, let's first go to the protesters. I want to hear what they have to say. So if we can roll this piece of video.
We are still asking Macron to listen to the workers. He is playing deaf until now, but he has seen that there are a lot of people, that these reforms are really being rejected by all workers. He must step back. We are asking him to withdraw these reforms.
I
know that the government does not listen to its people, but I'm hoping that this protest will be useful. In any case, if we do nothing, things will not change, so we have to be here, and we must show that we're not giving in. The government doesn't want to give in. Neither do we.
Hey, Cole, thanks for joining us today. Can you catch us up with some of the latest developments?
Yeah, so we've had nearly 2 months of these mass protests going back to January. We just saw one of the biggest mobilizations since the movement began. According to the government, 1.28 million people nationwide turning out to protest last week. More than 3 million, according to unions. And we've also seen the opposition to this pension reform that would raise the minimum level again from that minimum eligibility age from 62 to 64. We've seen opposition stay pretty steady, around 7 in 10 French people opposed to the reform. What we have seen also change in really the last few days is the government move along with this reform. We saw the Senate give the thumbs up to a version of the bill. And now we could have a joint parliamentary commission between the Senate and the National Assembly taking up that bill on Wednesday, it looks like, and then a vote in both chambers potentially as early as Thursday. So really a pivotal few days here coming up for the government and also the movement against these pension reforms. We have another wave of protests that's scheduled on Wednesday, another big day, unions calling to turn out in force. And then in the meantime, rolling strikes that we've seen in a number of different sectors across France. The railroads, we've seen garbage men go on strike here in France. The effects or in Paris, excuse me, the effects of that are quite visible. And we've also seen refinery workers, a lot of protests, still underway.
Well, thanks. So speaking of the government, we actually have a comment from Christopher Weisberg. He's a Minister of Parliament. Check it out.
So in France, our pension system is public. So in order to pay retirees for their pensions, you need to have active people to pay where is a retired. And right now, we have 1.7 active people paying for one retired person. 50 years ago, it was 3 for 1, and when the system was created, it was 4 for 1. So you can see that this system, in order to work out, needs more workers and more people working. And this is precisely why we have to do this reform.
Okay.
So, Gaëlle, is the math as simple as that? A system that was built for 4 workers to support each retiree now depends on 1.7 workers to support them?
I'm Ariane and not Gaëlle, but that's fine.
I'm so sorry, Ariane. You're the one who I want to answer to this, though.
Okay. Yes, there is a demographic problem. Yes, we know that the system might need to be changed. But what people are saying in France, what the vast majority of people are saying in France, is that the way this reform has been done is unfair, and that there are other ways of doing it, that the government chose to increase retirement age, fine, but there are other ways of doing it, including taxation. So yes, there is a problem with demographics, we know this, but to just say the only solution is to work longer is wrong, because there are other solutions, and that's what the people in the street and public opinion is saying.
Gael, you're nodding your head. Jump in on that.
Yeah, of course there are other solutions. If the government say that there is a demographic problem and that we need to find money to sustain the system, but that's not true. If you can't find money elsewhere, if you go and tax super profits, for example, we know that dividends grow year by year, so we can have money that way. We know also that tax evasion can also be somewhere where you can find money. Tax evasion in France is something like 100 billion euros each year. So let's take the money where it is.
Okay, so it seems like everyone might agree on the problem, but just not the solution to it. Why does the government seem so focused on this singular solution? Gael.
I just wanted to add that about the demographic problem, that the committee of I don't know how to translate it in English. The Retirement Orientation Committee said that in the next years the sustainability of the system is not in question. So just put forward. Just don't.
You don't have to solve the problem now.
Say too much.
Is what you're saying?
No, the problem is not in the next year. The committee said that in most of hypotheses, it's not an issue.
Ariane?
If I can interject here, yes, there is a problem long term, and when you ask why has the government decided to do the way it's a political decision. If you decide that you don't want to decrease pension, which obviously is the right, way to do it, but more importantly, if you decide that you don't want to touch taxation, that you don't want to make companies contribute, that you don't want to make retired people, and especially the wealthy retired people, contribute, then there is only one solution, which is to raise legal age. But where the government is wrong is to say that this is the only solution. It's the only solution when you have dismissed everything else.
I want to bring in another piece of video here. These are from some students and women protesters. Here, check this out.
For women who work part-time or have precarious contracts and who will therefore have smaller pensions, it is not their fault. It is not their personal choice or their economic choice. They are subject to a system that pushes them to take care of domestic tasks, to look after their children, to look after their home, and therefore they have to work part-time. They will suffer this when it comes to their retirement.
They say pension reform won't affect students, but in truth, if it concerns everyone, even young people, we will be affected. If it's going to be pushed back to 64 years, afterwards it could be pushed back to 66 or 69. It can go on indefinitely. Obviously it's happening now too, so that's why I'm mobilised. It affects my parents, the whole family.
Cole, is this affecting different groups of people in unfair ways?
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly what protesters think. It's certainly what the majority of the French public believes, that this reform is disproportionately hurting the least well-off in French society. So if you think about the people that arguably stand to benefit the most from retirement at the end of their careers, the tail end of their careers, we're talking about blue-collar manual workers. People working difficult jobs, physically grueling jobs, construction, people that are janitors, people working in factories. And these are the people that are essentially being asked to shoulder the burden of that political decision made by Emmanuel Macron that Ariane was just referring to. So blue-collar workers across the board stand to lose the most from this reform. And you can look at other categories of the population as well. We saw there was an International Women's Day protest against this reform as well, because women, particularly mothers, stand to lose from this reform. People who have to take time off from their professional lives in order to help raise children, they're going to have to suffer from this reform as well. And you could go down and look at immigrant workers as well. I saw a collective of undocumented workers at the protest in Paris. They disproportionately work these tough, low-wage, blue-collar jobs as well.
Ariane?
And I would like to add, you're totally right in what you say, but I think the unfairness is also the fact that already now the life expectancy once you retire and your health condition once you retire is very, very different when you are a blue collar worker and other categories. So if you ask these people to work even longer, then the disparity in terms of life expectancy and health condition will be even higher. So that's an additional source of unfairness, and that's how it's perceived by the population.
Gaëlle?
Yeah, and also we know that in France today, age and good health is around 63 years old. So if you go until 64, then you know that when you arrive at the retirement age, then you have really a lot of risk to be unhealthy and not to enjoy the last years of your life. And what people want in France is they want to live, they want to enjoy the last years, and they just don't want to survive. Life is already really difficult today because of inflation, because of working conditions for all the workers, as you said, Ariane. So they just want to enjoy life, and that's not something unbelievable just to think of.
Wait, I want to riff on this just for a second.
I'd like to add,
go ahead.
I'd like to add as well. It's very well saying to people you have to work longer, but we already have a problem with high rate of unemployment amongst older people. So if you are told to work 2 extra years, but there's no job for you, then what are you going to do? You're going to be unemployed. So that adds to the to the worry that people have.
Yeah, Gaëlle?
Yeah, and I wanted to add also that the government says, but you will be able to change work if you have a difficult job. You will be able to change job. But I mean, if you have been all your life long something like maybe I don't know a garbage man, then you know that you won't be able to change at 62 or 64 because of unemployment and because you won't find anything else, and because your body will be completely broken and your mind will be broken, and there's no solution.
Hey, I want to riff on that. This is someone, I think they're tweeting, no, they're in the YouTube crowd. They're called Flower Child Messages. And they say, I hope not. I don't want France to become America. Please no. And I kind of get this. And Cole, just philosophically, like, are people in France saying, wait a second, we're more than just cogs in the machine? Like, we actually want to live our lives and enjoy it, maybe outside of providing to the economic system the whole time?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think that what we're seeing with the protest movement is that this goes beyond the question of just retirement itself and pensions itself. That's something that both the left-wing opposition and the trade unionists and the government can agree on. That this debate has gone beyond just this precise question of retirement reform. And I think that's why we're seeing so much opposition to this as well in France. Is that if you look at Emmanuel Macron's presidency, he's taken adopted a number of policies that tend to benefit elites, the wealthier people in France, and the lower segment of the population, people that are earning less money, don't see the benefits of those changes. You can go back to the beginning of Macron's presidency, where in his very first year upon being elected, he scrapped France's tax on wealth, which applied to people with 1.3 million euros and more in assets. He imposed labor law reforms to make it easier to lay off workers. He's been opposed to hiking the minimum wage. So when you look at all these measures, and then you say, well, on top of that, the government's asking you to work 2 years longer to finance, again, that political choice that they made, people perceive it to be very unfair. So they look at the overall context of Macron, and they also look at, really the question of work too in France, which is certainly under inspection with the movement.
And the age used to be 60, right? And Sarkozy brought it up to 62 over a decade ago, right? Did he face the same opposition?
Oh, yes. Yes, it did. There was it 14 or 15 days of action? Gail, you probably know the exact number better than me. Yeah, it was massive, and the people on the street were massive too. It didn't work. The pensions, the pension went through, but there was already this, this this willingness not to go to 62. And I think the difference with today is that in 2010, no one said that it was about justice, about social justice, about fairness. It was, we have to save the system. It's about sacrifice. Whereas the big mistake for me that the government has done this time is to claim that it was done in the name of justice, in the name of fairness. It took about 5 minutes for that to unravel because people could see very quickly and very clearly that is not the case. But yeah, the same happened in 2010. And the same will happen if we have another reform in 5 years' time.
Yeah,
and
of course.
Yeah, go for it.
Just to give a little bit.
Go Cole, and then we'll go Gail.
Go call it. Okay, go call
So
it.
just to give a little bit more context on that last point we were discussing, if you listen to the left, if you listen to the Labour movement in France, they consider the right to be able to retire with dignity to be really a pillar of social progress, something that they've fought for decades. Speaking with MPs who are opposed to the reform, they've said that they put this in the long history of the fight to have less time. To have more time away from work, the fight to end child labor, then winning the right to the weekend, then winning the right to retirement, then lowering the retirement age to 60, which we saw under François Mitterrand, the first socialist president in the history of the French Fifth Republic. And then, like you mentioned, Sarkozy moving the opposite direction from 60 to 62. And so they view Macron's latest reform as this proposed reform is really the latest step in an erosion of the social progress people have been fighting for generations. So it really goes beyond just, again, the specific issue of this sort of technical calculation of 62 to 64.
Hey, Gael, I'm going to have you jump in next, but I just want to bring out, I want to tell the viewers that we did reach out to the government for a response on this. We didn't get it, but we actually do have a bit of video from Oliver Varane. He's a government spokesperson. Here, listen to this.
First of all, we will not give up on our pensions reform. We are taking account, step by step, of all the signs that allow us to consider that we will be able to have our pension reform adopted. And therefore, we are continuing on the path we have embarked on. That is consultation with political parties. And we will get there.
So he seems pretty confident, Gael. What would you say about that?
Well, I think the government is not confident at all. That's because that's why he blocked the vote on the Senate. And then the government, there is still rumors about using the Article 49.3 of the Constitution, which allows the government to impose the bill without a formal vote in both assemblies. So I wouldn't say that the government is confident. We know that the government tries to impose the thing, which is what we call a denial of democracy. The government doesn't want to hear what the people in the streets. They don't want to really talk about with the unions. All of the unions in France wrote President Macron last week. He answered that he wouldn't meet the unions. Why? If he is not worried, why wouldn't he talk with the unions? Just he knows that with more than 3 million people in the streets last week, and people in protest for 2 months now, we think that he is not confident, and that's not because the law will eventually be voted on Thursday, that the protest will end, the contestation will end. That's not right. The anger in France is really, really big today because of everything that Colin explained.
Well, hold on. I want to bring in Erin Zaleski. She's a freelance journalist, and she has a little bit different view of it. Let's hear what she has to say.
Macron is not backing down, and I have the impression that more French people are resigned to the bill pushing through and becoming law. And while the majority support the ongoing strikes, I think, okay, don't quote me on this, I think it's about 56%, some people are feeling strike fatigue. For instance, ordinary people who just want to get to work in the morning are getting tired of the train and the metro cancellations. There's garbage piling up on the streets of Paris. And at the end of the day, people are starting to feel that the strikes aren't going to make a difference. The government's going to push its agenda through anyway, so why punish ordinary people?
Gael, would you like to respond to that? All right, Ariane's raising her hand. No, okay, Ariane, go for it.
Yeah, I mean, several points here. First of all, I agree with what, sorry, I didn't catch the name anyway, with what's just been said, that this seems to be some form of resignation, but the anger will remain. Second, Article 49.3, I wouldn't say that it's anti-democratic, it's part of the Constitution, but the optics are going to be terrible if the government uses it. And finally, I agree with Gael that I don't think the government is super confident, because it will really come down to 2 or 3 votes, and there's going to be a lot currently, right now, a lot of behind the scene calling up MPs and try to convince them. So it is going to be really, really tight, and it might end up using Article 49.3, which is going to fuel anger even more. But I agree that there has been the feeling that it will go through anyway, and we see that in the polls.
Cole, do you see a sense of strike fatigue there? Is the trash piling up in Paris?
Yeah, I mean, I think the trash is piling up in Paris, but that doesn't necessarily mean people aren't supporting the movement. I mean, I think that 56% number that was quoted is interesting. 56% of people support open-ended strikes to end, to block the pension reform. That's a pretty radical proposal, I think, if you look at it. People saying they support open-ended strikes, meaning that they're willing to have some amount of personal sacrifice in order to stop this bill from being approved. So we have another big wave of protests on Wednesday. Now we're seeing images of some of these blockades. I think what the government wanted was for people to very quickly turn against the protest movement, quickly turn against a sort of hardening of the protest movement, them adopting more radical tactics, trying to blockade refineries, having these open-ended strikes. We haven't seen that happen, and that, again, speaks to the anger. And so, perhaps polling also shows that people expect the bill to pass, but I think people also oppose it, and I think we'll see pretty big turnout for that next day of strikes on Wednesday.
Going to our YouTube audience here, the rest of the world is watching. There are comments about the Netherlands. I think, is their age at 67 now? So they certainly seem to be pulling for the workers there. Ariane, you were going to say?
No, I mean, sorry, I was just going to say that this week is a now or never. Now or never for the union to really put pressure on the government to back down, and that's Wednesday. I'm not saying that if the bill goes through, there won't be any more protests, but Wednesday is absolutely crucial. And Gael, I don't know if you could tell us whether you think that more strikes are going to, more sectors are going to be affected by strikes. It's now or never for the union, but it's also now or never for the government. And I think there'll be, it's edge of your seat kind of situation, because the numbers are going to be really, really, really tight.
Gael, what do you think?
Yeah, we expect a lot of people on strike and in the protest on Wednesday. We know that in railway, for example, people are still on renewable strike. It's also the case in refineries. And well, there are sectors that are on strike every day, and we intend to have a huge protest on Wednesday.
Cole, we've got about a minute left. What should international watchers be watching for there in France? See which way this is going to go.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the other takeaways from this movement is we've heard so much about sort of this dominant political opposition in France being between Emmanuel Macron and the far right, incarnated by Marine Le Pen. I think what this movement is showing is, in fact, there is another source of opposition to Macron's policy that does not come from the far right. It comes from the labor movement. It comes from the left. These forces that people assume to be dead actually are quite alive and actually can speak to the preoccupations and concerns of the majority of the French population. So the labor movement is alive and the left is alive, regardless of what happens in this vote this week.
Again, a reminder, we did reach out to the government for a comment on this. They chose not to be a part of it. Next time, I hope they will be. We will continue watching this important story on Al Jazeera English as it unfolds, and we'll see you back here at the stream tomorrow. Thank you for joining.